Are you ready to get real? Welcome to real estate, the world's loneliest career, where you're always out of balance, unfulfilled, the role models are fake, the numbers unattainable, and you're just supposed to be and do it all. Join self-made millionaire real estate agents, wives, moms, and business owners as we level up, learn from special guests, and elevate and disrupt an entire industry through real education our way.
Hey, everybody. Angela is out sick today, but I am so excited to have a new friend here with us. Katelyn Dominelli is a real estate agent with Keller Williams, and she is also a mental health professional. And I saw Katelyn comment on a post in one of our giant hundreds of thousands of agents Facebook groups talking about kind of counseling real estate agents on good mental health. And I feel like with everything going on in the world, the economy, the market right now, that is something that is really important to talk about because our mental and our emotional health affect our businesses so much. So Katelyn, tell us about yourself, your journey in both aspects and how you got here.
Sure. So, first of all, obviously, thank you for having me. It's something I'm very passionate about. I realized pretty quickly when I got into the industry that there was a large gap in mental health education. And I know we have a lot of mandatory education each year that we have to do for our license, and we're always very heavily focused on ethics and fair housing, and all of which is extremely important. But I've noticed over time that there's a huge lack in mental health. And I've been a mental health professional now for over 20 years. I have a master's of science in psychology. So I've worked in many different settings. I've worked in inpatient psychiatry. I've worked in the emergency room. I did a clinical trial at a cancer center before studying the mental health disparities in cancer. And I've currently been the chief operating officer of an outpatient practice now for about 10 years. And that practice services over 5,000 patients.
Wow.
So very busy. Yeah. Got into real estate in 2017. I got licensed. My husband and I were the very cliche contractor, realtor, house flippers, So in 2015, we watched Tarek and Christina do it, and we said we could do that too. And so we did. After a few years, I realized it would be best to get my license. So I did. I never intended to do a lot with it. I really just was getting it for our business, but then it basically exploded over the years. So I had my best year ever last year. I closed 53 transactions last year. Yeah, in addition to the, running the psychiatric practice. So
holy moly.
Yeah, definitely busy, but I noticed immediately when I got into real estate that it was almost like a social work job in a lot of aspects. So my very first deal I ever did, my clients were homeless. They were living in a hotel that they had been put up in by the Red Cross after losing their house in a flood. And immediately I thought, wow, it's such a divine intervention that they found me, because I'm so used to dealing situations like this. So what a great first deal to have. Well, then it never stopped. It wasn't just like that was the first deal and you never encountered these issues again. It's basically 50 to 75% of my deals have some sort of underlying mental health or social work theme to them. And I've always told people as a joke, and it's not really a joke, but it's just making light of a situation. I've built an entire business on the 3Ds: death, divorce, and despair. And those are the phone calls that I get. So it seems like as time goes on, right? As time goes on, I don't know how real estate agents are out there even doing these deals without any sort of mental health training. It actually scares me at this point.
Well, I've always said, and obviously we are not attorneys, we are not surgeons, selling real estate is not saving lives and it's not rocket science, but excuse me, I have always said, when you go to be an attorney, you're in years and years of school. And part of the schooling that you receive is how to negotiate correctly without mowing over other people, how to handle your client's emotions, how to handle when you fall in love with a client and they're guilty or they've done something bad or they're super emotional or they don't win and it could mean their lives, right? And yes, real estate is maybe not that important, but it's equally, if not more dramatic, in my opinion, because surgeons, attorneys, they're insulated more from their clients than we are. They're not taking 2 a.m. phone calls when the client is breaking down. So it's crazy to me that we don't receive any support. They also learn how to balance their books, keep their finances in check, right? Real estate agents, you get a license out of a Cracker Jack box. Here you go,
Right. And then you're thrown to the wolves. And there's been so many times where I've had to, it's funny because when I got into it, I thought there was going to be this awesome separation between the two businesses. I was going to do real estate to give me a break from psychiatry, and I was going to do psychiatry to give me a break from real estate. And they are so intertwined. Like, what an amazing mistake that was, to think that I was going to keep those two boxes separate, because they're actually more entwined than I ever imagined that they would be.
And I think that women see this more than men, for sure, because I have had male real estate partners, male real estate friends, agent friends, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I never get these kind of calls. I never have clients that have emotional breakdowns, so I don't know if it's just like attracts like, or if we're naturally, caretakers more. But especially with the world right now, I mean, man, everybody's just scared and really unsure, and it's not good. Agents and clients.
Right. And honestly, I'm a big fan of statistics, right? I work in the health sciences. I don't like to just say things that aren't substantiated with facts. So you're right. We are in statistically the most anxiety induced time of the history of psychiatry. So in 2020, and most of that, mind you, was induced by the pandemic, because anxiety, by definition, is the fear of the unknown. And what better way for us to all fear the unknown than what happened in 2020? So by December of 2020, over 42% of United States adults would have met the clinical definition of depression and or anxiety.
Wow.
Now, yeah, I mean, really think about that for a minute. So, and I want to take a pause there to explain the difference, because those terms are very loosely thrown around, depression and anxiety. And normal sadness, normal day-to-day anxiety is not clinical depression. Sadness is normal. Sadness relative to an event is normal. A breakup, a loss, a grief, having a bad day, all very normal. Clinical depression affects your activities of daily living. So in addition to all the other criteria that we use to diagnose somebody when they are clinically depressed, the big one that we look for is a disruption in their day-to-day life. So are you doing all the things that you normally used to do? And that's kind of one of the telltale signs for us if somebody has met the clinical criteria and requires intervention.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot on this show. I talk a lot about mental health in general, but in the way it affects our lives and our relationships. And let's not forget, we're also in a business that in the good years destroys marriages, destroys relationships with children, destroys people's mental health and physical health, right? So in the trying years, it's even worse. But I've lost 9 friends in 2.5 years to suicide or, like purposeful drug overdose. And everywhere I look, and my partner Angela on the show has lost many clients and friends as well. I definitely think that the pandemic was maybe the first time that like the whole universal collective experienced trauma. Mm-hmm. And so many people didn't even know what that was. Definitely didn't know how to deal with it. And now it's just like, let's all go back to normal and just sweep it under the rug. And there's so many people that are, like, wait a minute, I don't feel good. I don't understand why. And then on top of it, now you throw in all this crazy stuff that's going on in the news. Everybody's like, we're going to go to war with China. The economy is going to melt down. and it is just, I feel like everyone I interact with is either really sad, really in crisis, or really angry.
Yeah. Well, you just said so many great things. So yes, when we are in trauma, the flight or fight response has been in us since the dawn of age. That's what kept us safe. That's what gatherers and hunters used to know when they were in danger, not in danger. So the startle reflex, somebody runs up behind you and yells boo. Whatever happens next is your cortisol kicking into overdrive and your flight or fight response activating. That response activates during a trauma, which sometimes keeps us, of course, you've heard the saying, running on adrenaline. That's what we do during a trauma. It's actually post trauma that we sit down and that settles down and we look around and go, what the heck just happened? And that's where the real feelings and real problems start to come in. So I think that's what we're experiencing. Mental health now is actually worse than it was when we were in the peak of the pandemic. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One is what I just said. The other is there is a huge, and they're just starting to come out on the research with this. There's a huge connection right now to COVID and post COVID depression and anxiety. Because
Really?
you have to remember, COVID has a very serious inflammatory response to it. So anybody that has any sort of underlying condition, whether it's an autoimmune disorder, a mental health disorder, COVID really acts that up. So that's why some people end up with gout or shingles or all kinds of things after COVID. But what nobody's talking about is the post-secondary depression or anxiety that ramps up a good week or two after you've had COVID. And it's very serious in some people, and they're just now starting to make that connection. So I think that's the second half of what's going on, the actual response to the trauma and then the medical response to the COVID.
It's just been absolutely crazy. And, I'm sure every generation says that. But I do feel like, in years in the future, people in the field of psychology, in mental health, people in general will look back on this period of like maybe 3 to 5 years and go, whoa, like that really, it was crazy. And to go from that, which was really scary, to like, yay, everything's good and happy, to like, oh shit, here we go. Yeah. It's dark and scary again, is like, maybe people even have some kind of like little PTSD attached with that too, like, oh, here we go again, the world's going to explode,
Right. There's a lot of long-term effects to experiencing a trauma, and trauma is not something that's new that we've treated. I mean, there's tons of different types of childhood trauma, abuse trauma that people experience that carries out throughout adulthood. But for a lot of people, this is the first time that they have experienced a trauma, and they don't really know how to identify it as such. Because a lot of people, they go on their day to day and they don't think, wow, that was really traumatic, because we've all already moved on, right? Like the world is still going. We're all back to work. Everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, but nobody has paused and processed what we've actually all been through as a society.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really feel it. I think everyone really feels it right now. Like, even if you're not that perceptive to other human beings, I mean, just in the way that people are showing up in the everyday world, they're yelling at their server at the restaurant, yelling at the person in the Starbucks line in front of them. With real estate transactions right now, the agents are like insane. They're really aggressive. They can be really nasty, like on both the buyer side and the listing side. Yeah. And that is coming from fear for sure, which is a whole different type of thing, and then you've got all the agents that are, I mean, we see them posting and talking about it all the time, where they're like, I can't get out of bed because I don't have business, or I don't have anything to do, and I'm afraid. I'm so afraid, so it's pretty intense.
And so many people in the sales industry tie their self-worth to their sales. And that's a really dangerous thing. First of all, it's dangerous to tie your identity to your profession, no matter who you are. But let alone whenever you tie it to a profession that is rewarded on your performance. That is the worst thing that you can ever do to yourself. And every productivity coach in the world probably cringes when I get to this part of my speech, but stop setting goals. Stop it. Stop setting goals that are higher and higher and higher each year. Because you know what? Sometimes your goal should be just to get out of bed and get a shower. So I think we're just creating this unattainable, reach that people are going for. And the repercussions of that is constant failure. And that, again, adds to the depression. You had mentioned suicide earlier, and I don't want to just glaze over that because that's a really important topic that I wanted to touch on. In 2020, almost 46,000 people in the United States committed suicide. So we have one suicide every 7 seconds in the United States. Yeah, so that's really intense. I'm sorry, 7 minutes. I said seconds, 7 minutes, which is still terrible.
Yeah,
every 7 minutes, there is a suicide in the United States. 70% of those remain middle-aged white men. Now, there's a couple reasons for that, but 70% of those are middle-aged white men. 2 reasons for that. 1, they're the least likely to seek treatment. 2, they're the most likely to use lethal methods. Women actually attempt suicide at a rate of 3 to 4 times higher than men. But men are more successful at it because they are more willing to use a lethal method. So in addition to the people that actually completed suicide in 2020, 1.2 million people tried. And 3.2 million people made a plan to do it and didn't try. So now we're talking almost 5 million people that were seriously touched by suicide just in 2020.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Do they have any, I don't know, are there statistics that anyone tracks on like what type of careers or businesses they're in, just out of curiosity?
So yeah, there's always been a really high rate of suicide in the sales professions.
That's what I was wondering.
The number one, so strangely enough, and I don't know if this has changed year to year, but I have seen this statistic several times. Veterinarians actually have the highest rate of suicide of any profession. And the reason they think that is because the amount of euthanasia they have to perform.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the speculation as to why that is. But pretty much under that, a lot, actually physicians in general are high in suicide rate, followed by the sales professions. And again, failure, right? So reminding
that
yourself,
one makes so much sense to me because people have
right,
such high highs and such low lows.
yes,
And, I was an agent, Angela, my partner was too, all the way through, the Great Recession. And I mean, yeah, I worked with a woman who was top right before that happened. I mean, she would go for a professional massage every day. The amount of plastic surgery that she was doing is hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, right? She drove a Mercedes G-Wagon. Like she had everything. And then it came down to selling the car, selling the house, selling the clothes, not doing those things anymore. And she made it through it and she's amazing. But like that high to low, especially when you have the pressure of supporting a family that's used to the lifestyle that high provides, it's
right.
a lot.
Right. And our bodies weren't meant to constantly sustain those high highs and those low lows. So our brains were never wired to go through those types of emotions day in and day out. And that's oftentimes what ends up exacerbating people's symptoms, leads to clinical depression, leads to burnout, which I do a whole class on burnout because burnout is a clinical diagnosis at this point. Yeah, so that's a whole nother subject. But one of the things that you had mentioned, what do you think by far is the number one stress that Americans cite? The number one thing that causes American stress?
Finances.
So, but there's all kinds of research on finances and happiness. There's classes on it, there's books on it. So again, when people fall trap to that correlating their happiness to finances, it's a real problem. And back in, I think it was 2010, there was a study that was done where they tried to see, is there a financial apex where you really do reach happiness based on money? And what they found was at that time, once you hit $75,000 a year as a family in the United States, anything above that did not have any correlation whatsoever to your happiness. So when they dug deeper into that study to figure out why is that, what they found was $75,000 was what met basic needs at that point. It met all your basic needs and provided you a little bit of extra money. Now, there was a correlation between being unhappy in the less you made under 75,000, right? Because the more and more that was stripped away of that, the less and less of your basic needs you were meeting. So it is important to know that in poverty level and in people who aren't meeting their basic needs, there definitely is a correlation between money and happiness. However, once your basic needs are met, there is not, which I think a lot of people would find surprising or not even believe.
I think a lot of people would find that surprising and not believe it. I think any top producer that you talk to would agree that that is absolutely not the case. We've talked about so many times on this show, the toxic culture, like you brought up, that's really pervasive in this industry of not even what's your name, like how many units did you do? What's your volume? Are you in this group? Did you get to go to this mastermind? And like the fact that your entire worth as a human being is built around that. And so many people we've seen, like myself included, destroy their lives over it. And no one is happy at the top. If you look, and honestly, that is the whole reason that we started this podcast, was we wanted to strip away the crap between what you hear on stage from people and what's actually going on in their lives. And we've had so many amazing people that are making millions of dollars a year come on this show and talk about the fact that it isn't that great and it's not everything that they thought it would be. And they just keep pushing for more.
Right. Right. And again, back to the research, right? Because I absolutely love these studies because everybody can have an opinion, but when you back something up with a fact, you really have to stop and pause and look at it. And one of the concepts, psychiatric concepts that we talk about is called hedonic adaptation. Hedonic adaptation is basically the novelty wore off. Right? So it's where you start to get used to the things around you so they aren't as exciting to you anymore. Money is a huge, huge problem with hedonic adaptation. We get very used to having money. We get very used to the things that money buys us. And in studies of big purchases like houses, cars, people's excitement for those purchases wears off in an average of 6 to 8 weeks.
Whoa.
So as excited as you are to get into that new house, get that new car, it's done in 6 to 8 weeks. You're used to it. You're over it. And the positive thing that they find in a lot of these studies, because it's not all doom and gloom, if you purchase experiences with money as opposed to possessions, that tends to have a much, much longer happiness effect over time compared to, purchasing objects. So they really focus on memories, instead of buying a car, you take a vacation with your family. And statistically, it is shown that that has a much longer lasting effect on people's happiness versus possessions.
I love that. I would agree. My love language is gifts. So like when I'm, and words of affirmation, but when I'm like sad or feeling depleted, like my mental health is to go shopping. I learned that from my mom, who is amazing, but that's like what our whole family does. And yeah, I've bought a lot of stupid shit in my life that pretty much right afterwards, I was like, why did I do that? And I do think about the experiences that I've had way more than I think about what that stupid thing was that I bought.
Right. And money is a really strange thing. So a couple other studies that I find fascinating / disturbing relative to money, these were both done pre-social media. So this is even more scary because at this point, when these were done, people didn't have a million means of comparison to each other. So one study asked people, would you this is crazy. Well, the first one was they asked people who made $30,000 a year, how much money do you need to make to be happy? And the average relative answer was 50,000 a year. So everyone that was making 30,000 a year thought they needed to make 50,000 a year. So they took it a step further and they said, okay, we're going to take that number, that 50,000, and we're going to double it to 100,000 because there's all these people in this world that think $50,000 a year is going to make them happy. So we're going to double that amount and we're going to ask the people making 100,000 a year, what amount do you need to make you happy? And they collectively answered 250,000 a year. So
more money, more problems, more,
yeah,
more, more.
that really reiterates the fact that money is not correlating to your happiness because statistically, if all these people think you're happy at 50,000, you should definitely be able to double that number and be happy, right? But those people were not happy either. And unfortunately, and this brings up again that top producer mentality that, closing as most deals as possible. As a society, we are not happy when we watch other people succeed, which is really disturbing. So, another study that they did, they asked people, would you rather make $50,000 a year and everybody else you know and around you makes 25, or would you rather make $100,000 a year and everybody else around you makes $200,000 a year? So you make 50, everybody else makes 25, or you make 100 and everybody else makes 200. Overwhelmingly, people would rather make $50,000 a year and everybody else make 25.
So they want to make less money themselves as long as everyone else makes less money than them.
Absolutely. They would much rather make the most if everybody else was making less.
It just reiterates to me how toxic our industry is. And like, I've done this 21 years. I love it. It's been life-changing for me. It's amazing. But when it is like, it's super, super toxic. Everywhere you go, and like, if you make a decision to focus on your life and do more things that are fun and do more experiences and you fall down from the top producer list, then everybody's like, what is wrong with you? Are you okay? It's like, what do we do with it? How do we deal with this?
Right. Well, I think that again, you have to combat all those basic principles like hedonic adaptation. You can't keep chasing a goal that doesn't exist. What is your real financial goal? Make it realistic, make it small, make it attainable. I don't know why we set these big, crazy goals. And then what happens when you achieve a goal? How long are you really satisfied before you set the next one? I mean, you're on stage, you smile, you get an award, you walk off, boom, already working towards the next time. So I think that's part of it. The other thing is you have to set a baseline for happiness. So another thing that really screws us up in this society is called a psychological reference point. So your psychological reference point is all of your experiences and everything that's around you all rolled up into one, and then that becomes your reference point. So to give an example of this, if you are obsessed with social media, right, and you're just watching the Kardashians, you are watching the Real Housewives, you are watching the agents that on Selling Sunset that make like $300,000 commissions. If that's your reference point, you are always going to be less than. But if you are somebody that goes to the homeless shelter and volunteers and you see people living in actual poverty and despair and you go on mission trips and you involve yourself in the community, your reference point becomes them. So it's very dangerous, the information that we constantly take in, because even though the Kardashians are a 1 in 50 million shot of being that person and everybody else in the world is actually normal. If you overwhelm yourself so much with those types of people, the top producers in your office, if you're so obsessed with what they're doing and how much they're making, that becomes your reference point. And that is really a guaranteed setup for failure. So combating hedonic adaptation and combating your reference point, or being cognizant of your reference point and how it affects you, is extremely important in this industry.
Yeah, it's I think the whole world went crazy for a while there with like the hustle culture. They're like Gary Vee and Grant Cardone, who I love and are amazing. Hustle, 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 grind, 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 like wake up at 4 a.m., do all the things, drink excellence for breakfast, like just absolutely like maniacally crazy. And there were all these books and these shows that were like, your goal isn't big enough. And someone came up with the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal idea. And the fact that if you weren't pushing yourself, like you sucked. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people push themselves and don't have Kardashian results, so they just suck. But what has been interesting is I have seen them start to just really in the last like maybe year back off that hustle culture stuff a little bit and start to talk more about like quality of life and maybe a little mental health stuff. But it's really damaging when every person that you look to in your industry or in the world for like your basis of success and how you're doing is telling you that you suck unless you're the top 0.0001%.
Right. And it's like you said, I mean, we can't use the word enough. It's toxic. It's very toxic. And the other thing is everybody has a baseline of happiness. So you want to picture your happiness just on one continuous line. Sometimes it rises above it, sometimes it falls below it, but you almost always return back to that baseline. And an example of that's very extreme, but I found, again, I'm all about these studies and the research. This was done in the early 80s, and they followed two completely different groups of people. They followed lottery winners, people who won huge sums of money in the lottery, and they simultaneously followed a couple people that had been paralyzed in an accident within the last year. So now within the last year, one group of people have won the lottery, the other group of people have become paralyzed. What they found is that initial happiness and sadness had obviously a huge disparity, right? I mean, the people that won the lottery had the highest levels of happiness, and the people that were paralyzed had extreme, problems going on. Within a year, though, both groups had returned to their baseline of happiness. And when they dug into this deeper, it was because the people who were paralyzed had grown all types of new appreciations for things that they had previously taken for granted or maybe not noticed. Whereas the people who won the lottery became extremely bored with things that used to be meaningful to them. So they cited an example of getting coffee with a friend, right? You have billions of dollars. You can fly around the world 10 times. You can do whatever you want. So getting coffee with a friend all of a sudden was like a very mundane, not exciting thing to do. And because of that, because one group began to gain appreciation and the other group began to lose it, they both ended up right back at the same place in a year, which again, I think people would find that hard to believe. They think, well, if I won the lottery, it would solve all my problems and life would be so good. No, wrong. Wrong. I mean, you've seen those shows on TV, right? Where they follow lottery winners and they actually have like the worst, outcomes.
I just feel like everybody wants to be where someone else is. And I don't know how you cure that, but like, and I can only talk for myself, people that have listened to the show for a long time or know me have heard these stories a lot of times, but, I was at the top, every list in the country. And it caused so much damage, that like obsessive need to keep pushing, and so much damage in me and so much damage in my family. And I know so many people that are like that. And I would look at other people like the mom who got a real estate license just to take her kids to Disneyland. And I would be like, oh my God, I just want to be her. I want the pressure to go away.
Yes.
I had the most ridiculous year of all time, but now it's January. I got to turn around and do it again. How am I going to do that? And I would look at those people and go like, wow, their marriage is good. They're happy. Like she got to read her book today and do her self-care. But then those people sometimes look at the other people and go, well, if I was just doing 500 transactions a year, I'd be happy. And I think that's why you see people in this business break their business down, build it up, break it down, build it a different way 100 times, because they're like looking for the business that's going to create that happiness.
Right. Well, and at the end of the day, social media is the devil. I mean, if I didn't have to sell myself to get deals and do this and do that, I would probably delete every platform I have, because it's become the most obnoxious thing in the world. Let's just call it what it is. Nobody, of course, everybody always posts the good, look at this, look at that. How many realtors do you see get on there that are like, shittiest day ever, all my deals fell apart, my clients are crazy, my husband's fighting with me, I didn't cook dinner, I hate my life, good night.
Every day, all day long.
But you know what? I bet I could post that 90% of the days.
No, that's why I said that's why we started this show in the first place, because we were so sick of the bullshit where it's like, we know all these people, we are top producers. I hate that word, first of all, but we know everyone else who is, and we're like, they suck, their marriage sucks, they're unhappy, that she cried herself to sleep, he is drinking himself to death, it is unbelievable.
It really is. And for what gain? That's the funny thing. Like, if you sit somebody down and say, what have you sacrificed to be this good? What have you lost to be this good? They can all tell you. But if you look at somebody and say, other than money, what have you gained? I bet you would be met with crickets.
I think that's an amazing question. I don't know how they would answer that. First of all, I think a lot of them would not answer it truthfully, because some of them may say things like ego. Everyone knows me, everyone loves me, but they're not going to tell people that, right? But I don't think there isn't anything. And I also think that the profession has gotten difficult in that, like during that 2008 recession time, I felt like I helped people, like we were doing short sales. We were keeping people from foreclosing on their homes. We were, it felt like I was doing something that made a difference in people's lives versus the last couple of years. And unfortunately, we know that National Association of Realtors says 90% of all agents licensed right now have only been through the last 3 to 4 years. It's absolutely crazy, right? But they don't feel that. And what they feel is, no offense, because that's my life too, they're talking to suburban housewives who want an extra 200 square feet in their living room, or men who want an extra stall in a garage to put another toy in it, right? So it has lost a lot of the calling, or what felt like you were even doing something that was worthwhile.
Right. Yeah. And
money.
Yeah.
Even with the clients now, how much am I making? How much can I pull out of this property? I'm going to argue over $100 on an inspection to death.
Right.
When I'm making 500 grand, it's a weird culture, not just the industry too.
Right. And I've been, I guess, lucky, because for better or worse, I work in a very, the market that I'm in lends itself to a lot of, like I said, social work type deals. I'm not in a high end market. I think I don't even think, again, I'm not into statistics. I have no idea what I do. I only know that I did so many transactions last year because it comes out in a report that I see eventually. To me, I think my average price point's around $100,000 or something. I sell houses for $15,000, $20,000 all the time. And again, at the end of the day, I personally get so much more self-gratification when I've helped somebody through a very serious life change or life decision versus a huge paycheck. Yeah. Do I love the huge deal every once in a while? Because yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I love to take my family on vacation. I love to have experiences. I focus much more on experiences than possessions. But at the end of the day, the most gratified that I feel is when we've come through a very difficult situation. And I think if more people kept that in the front of their mind, and more agents realize, like, I don't know why people don't realize this. Like, hello, we work in the helping profession. I think people are very confused and they think that this is just a sales job. You work in the helping profession. You are helping people through some of the most difficult, largest transactions of their life. And if you see it any other way, please get out. Please get out.
I have always said, like, earlier I said that I feel like women tend to encounter more difficult emotional deals than men. I have always said, though, you can base how good of a helper you are on whether or not they're sharing that with you. Because men, if you're listening, I don't care whether or not your deals aren't emotional. Your clients are. Your clients are still up at 1 a.m. worrying. They just may not be bringing it to you.
Right.
We are, they say statistically, after a death and a divorce or marriage on the same line, buying or selling real estate is the third most emotionally traumatic or difficult thing you could do.
Right. Right. And I think, again, where there's another misconception, it's not just the deals that go bad. It's not just the divorces and the deaths. There's two types of stress. There's eustress, EUSTRESS, and there's distress. So distress is centered around negative events, death, divorce, tragedy. But eustress is a whole different subset of stress that is centered around positive events, the birth of a child, moving, a job promotion. Equally creates stress, just looks a little bit different. And I think that we lose sight of that. I think that even when a transaction's going well, we think that our clients should just fall in line accordingly. Everything's great. What's your problem? It's still stressful at the end of the day. And you have to be able to navigate that as an agent.
100%. So so now we find ourselves, we've come off this like two equally bizarre things in the last 3 years, the world falling apart, we're all going to die, right? And then this boom in the economy, this boom in our business, everyone's doing really well financially, now down to this historically, statistically, what will be the biggest hard stop, biggest rise in interest rates historically ever, right? So people that don't study the data or the statistics, haven't been in the business a long time, don't understand that what they're feeling is real, because this is historically crazy. So, how do we handle it? Like, how do you identify a baseline for happiness? How can you get there if everything's falling apart around you?
Right. Well, we're in the hangover period, right? We've all been drunk on real estate for the last 2 years. Well, this is about to be the worst hangover you've ever had. First and foremost, I can't stress this enough, and I know it's going to come off cruel. If you're not in this business to help people, get out. If you got in this for the last 2 years because you thought it was easy money, get out.
Preach. Yeah.
That is the first thing that I would say. Second of all, so how do you achieve happiness? That's a completely open-ended question, right? First of all, I hate the word happiness. I know they use it in tons of studies and people use it a lot. Happiness looks different to so many people. Happiness to somebody that's starving in a third world country is a bowl of food. Happiness to a millionaire is closing a $20 million deal. So it's not relevant. What do you really want to achieve in life? Peace. Peace is actually what everybody should be working to achieve, because peace and true inner peace means that when everything is crazy around you, everything's going on around you, deals are falling apart, clients are crazy, you maintain yourself. You maintain your inner peace. That's not happiness. That's something that comes from within. That means that no matter what situation you put me in, I can have an inner peace. That is really what happiness is. And what that looks like for me, for you, for everybody, it's going to look different. But the hallmark sign of that is I don't let the things around me influence my day-to-day mood. And listen, do as I say, not as I do. Like, I'll let you know when I achieve that.
Well, and I think that's a misnomer too. Like mental health in general, it's a journey. I think a lot of people do all these things and fill their life up with all this stuff and even medicate themselves, which, listen, I'm on an antidepressant, no judgment. But in order to like get to perfect, that does not exist, right? So, you can have a perfect day and then you can have the worst 3 months of your life, So I think that the idea, like you said, of getting to perfect happiness, that's not even a thing. Like how many people do you think could ever say they've had a day, a minute, a month, a year of perfect happiness? It doesn't exist.
It doesn't. And you know why? Again, go back to that reference point, right? So you become unhappy when your reference point becomes skewed. So I'll give you an example of this. You're sitting in your backyard and you see the most beautiful sunrise ever. And then in 2 years, you go to the beach and you see the most beautiful sunrise ever at Myrtle Beach. And all of a sudden that becomes your new reference point for a sunrise. But then you go to Hawaii and you go the whole way to the top of the mountain and you see that sunrise. And now that is your reference point for the most beautiful sunrise ever. And guess what? That's okay if you still appreciate the sunrise in your backyard. But when you go back to your backyard and that sunrise sucks and you only ever want the sunrise in Hawaii for the rest of your life, you are in trouble. And that happens in real estate when you achieve a huge deal, right? And that's your reference point. Like you are chasing, it's like chasing a high. I mean, this is
I've said that for years. Real estate is like mainlining heroin. And then people are like, I need more. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And that is, again, even relevant to real drug addicts. You are chasing that initial high. And we spend a lot of time doing that when we're constantly replacing that reference point with a better one, because this client was better than that client. And then you have like the best deal, the easiest transaction that you make the most money. And unfortunately, that becomes your reference point. You want all your deals, all your transactions, all your clients to be like that. And they're just not going to. So you have to ride the wave, enjoy the high while it lasts, but you have to be able to come back down off of that and have a very achievable, normal reference point for your day-to-day life, or you're setting yourself up for total failure.
How do you find that? Like, can you give us an example of a healthy reference point? And one of the things that I think is really confusing too is like, don't listen to Katelyn and think that she's telling you to be like mediocre or suck at life, right? Like, I think people feel like it's either like you push for the giant goals, you're going to be a billionaire, or you suck at life. Like we've literally been told that if your goal isn't big enough, you suck, So you're just saying whatever it is that you're doing, don't kill yourself over it, right?
I mean, do it well and do it with intention. And how, you'll know when you feel good, when you feel bad. And here's the thing, don't minimize what it is you do if you're not the best at it. Do you think just because you're not a neurosurgeon and you are a PCP that you're a bad doctor? Everybody needs a PCP. Do you think that because, you're a realtor and don't work at McDonald's, you're better? No. So same kind of thing. Everybody has to fill in the gaps. So whatever it is you're doing, and again, I'm saying this like with total seriousness, if you work at McDonald's, be the best worker in the room. Be the best at what you do by competing against yourself and just being a better version of who you were the day before. And there's nothing that sets you apart then whenever that's your reference point, when your own self is your reference point and not the top producer, not, the girls on Selling Sunset, but when you are your own internal reference point, that is the best way to gauge where you're really at in life.
I love that. I just got in a knockdown drag out fight actually on social media this morning.
Did you really?
Yeah, because so this woman, which by the way, Facebook rolling out that like anonymous posting thing to me is a blessing and the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, because now people are really brave asking questions that they normally wouldn't. This poor woman was very brave and did not post anonymously, and went into one of these big groups and mentioned a magazine that she had gotten a call from that, I think most people have been in the business a while are aware is a magazine that you pay to advertise yourself in. And it was comment after hundreds of comments from people that were like, if you do this, you're fake. If you do this, you suck. I can't believe people post their Home Snap awards. People are so stupid. If you don't get an award from here, it's BS. And I was like, you know what? This is so crazy. And I've always been like, I want to smack everybody when those Home Snap awards come out that tease people for it, because I'm like, you know, who cares if she wants to pay the $500 to be in that magazine? If she would feel beautiful dressing up and taking photos of herself, good for her. If she's going to hand that out to her clients and use it to market herself, good for her. You know, like there's zero reason why everybody can't do what they should be able to do. For some agents, that Home Snap award is huge and they want to hang it on their wall. And it's the most positive thing they've ever done in their life. And you have all these people telling you that it's stupid. I mean, it's infuriating.
It is. And you know what's funny? I've commented on one of those Home Snap posts before because I was so annoyed. I love posting the Home Snap award. You know why? I could care less about it. You know who gets real excited when I post it? All my clients. Everybody that sees that and knows that they were a part of me earning that reward, they are genuinely happy for me.
And you should be genuinely happy. We should all be genuinely happy for anything that makes us happy. It's like, I feel like this year when they come out, I've literally said to myself, I'm going to message every one of those people and say, congratulations. You should be proud of yourself, because that's not, we are in this like mean girl comparison culture. You know, it's absolutely crazy. I've lost friends over it. I've seen people hurt themselves over it. It's crazy. And again, like I said, I think it's going to be really rough this year because everyone could take a hit.
Right. And I think they will, you know, and we've already started this very aggressive training of how to handle, you know, the shift, how to ride through this, and I understand the premise of that. I really do. But at the end of the day, they just let the cards fall where they may. And I think the biggest piece of advice to ever give, you know, in addition to all this stuff about hedonic adaptation and reference points, I tell people all the time, put your blinders on, stop looking left, stop looking right, look straight ahead, stay in your lane. If you stay in your lane, you very rarely find yourself in the situations that evoke all of these problems. So look ahead. Don't worry about what anybody else is doing. Compete with no one but yourself. As cliche as that is, it's the best advice I could give anybody. Your competition is yourself. I want to be a better version of who I was yesterday. That doesn't mean I want to sell more than I sold last year. It means I want to do it with more grace and more peace.
It's so true. I mean, it's just, yeah, I think that should be the goal, right? That's the reference point, is how did I do yesterday versus today, because you will be pushed into obsessing over what other people are doing. And I can tell you there's so much peace. This is something I've just started doing since January. Like, it's okay to unfollow people. It's okay to unfriend people. It's okay to not, like, one of my dearest friends in the entire world, love her to absolute death. I see her almost every day. She is the most negative person. She's in title about, you know, what's going to happen in this real estate market. And I had to say to her the other day, like, I love you so much, but I can't listen to this anymore because it's hurting me. Like, every time I leave you, I go home and I have a full blown, like, Mita Xanax panic attack. Yeah. So either you're going to have to discharge it elsewhere, or we're going to have to stop hanging out for a while. She didn't even realize she was doing it, you know, which is, I think a lot of people are like that too. They're going home right now to their spouses, their children, their partners, whoever, and unloading a lot of really damaging stuff that way too.
Right. And people have to remember too that anger is a very, very common symptom of depression. So in men especially, so men almost always manifest depression through anger versus sadness. So that's something I think that we need to keep in mind as well, because anger is kind of the new go-to emotion for a lot of people who don't know how to otherwise appropriately emote in a situation. People turn to anger when they feel unheard. So I
Or
think
scared,
yeah,
right?
or
Yeah.
scared or minimized or devalued. I mean, anger is a really go-to emotion for so many things.
I do that. I know now after a lot of work, right, that I have struggled really severely with like severe anxiety that
Right,
I didn't even know I had. And I felt angry all the time. And I realized after a lot of work that when I get really anxious, I get kind of like explosively angry. So
right,
I think there's so many people right now who are, like we said, having big emotions for the first times maybe in their lives, and
right.
they're hurting other people. It's really difficult to give grace if you're on the receiving end of that. But I think that's something else we have to focus on is like hurt people. It's stupid, but it's
Yes.
true. If there's something going on that's out of character or that's really nasty, you might take a minute to sit down and say like, are you okay?
Right,
Where is this coming from?
right. Yeah, and our emotions are not exclusive to ourselves, right? They're permeable. I mean, they permeate everybody that you come in contact with every day, especially the people that you love the most. And that's really hard sometimes, especially because so many people for the first time ever are simultaneously going through this. So I'm too worried about me to be
Mhm.
worried about you. This problem's exclusive to me. I have the worst problems. I have all this anxiety. I have all these problems. I'm not even recognizing yours because I'm so caught up in my own self that I can't even recognize what's going on around me and how I'm affecting, the other people that are around me.
Let's talk about, if you don't mind, we're going to go over time, but if you have the time, I'd love to keep you because this is so amazing. And I know people are going to learn a lot, but what do you do if you're in a really bad place because of all this stuff that's going on in the world and going on in your business, and work becomes really hard because you're having to also receive your clients' emotions, which is really
Yeah.
difficult? How do you, I think one of the biggest things people struggle with in this business is boundaries.
Yes.
And most of the time, it's actually emotional boundaries. I won't answer my phone at 7 p.m. when I'm putting my kid to bed, right? So,
Right.
how do you set boundaries that are healthy for yourself when everyone is terrified that they're going to lose the client? Because if they lose the client, they're in big trouble.
Right. Well, first of all, if you call me at 10 o'clock at night and I didn't answer and you don't want to work with me, I don't want to work with you either because you've already set the tone for the way your boundaries are going to go, and I'm not having it. I set my boundaries. They're extreme. They're not bendable. My phone hits do not disturb every single day, 365 days a year at 9 p.m. and it comes back off at 7 a.m. You're not having an emergency at 1 in the morning. And my clients know that I'm busy. They know all the things I do. And when I set that expectation up front, it has never scared anybody off. In fact, it has really fostered an amazing relationship with them where they text me first and say, hey, I know you're really busy, so just call me when you get a minute. I don't have clients who obsessively call me, text me. I can tell you the very large majority of my clients text me and say, when you have a minute, please call me. Because from the beginning, I don't say, I'm so busy, I'll get back to you when I can. But they know that I'm a very busy realtor. They know that I'm a mom. I have 2 teenage boys. They know that I help my husband run his construction business. They know that I run a psychiatric practice. That's all in my introduction bio that they get in my seller packet, buyer packet. And right from then they know, oh wow, like you're really busy, but they also know that I'm successful, so they know I must have a way to manage it all so it doesn't scare them off. But that from the beginning has set a natural boundary with me and my clients that they've always been super respectful of my time, which is amazing. To be honest, and that's how it all works because everybody's like, how do you do it all? Me and my clients have a very mutual respect of each other's time and boundaries, and it works very well.
Yeah, and I hope when people hear that, they understand too that, like you said, your transactions are pretty emotional. So it's
Right.
not like you're, just for people that hear that, oh, every transaction she's doing is just so easy, is that a conversation that you have with them? You just put it in your listing presentation? How do you communicate that to people?
So what I say to them is I'm usually with somebody. So whether it's in the psychiatric world, in the real estate world, most of my kids, most of the time somebody's standing in front of me. So it's always best to shoot me a text first. And then as soon as I see it, I'll get right back to you. But when you text me, then it reminds me, oh, kind of call them back. And they're totally cool with that. I very, very rarely have people just cold call me. And, to speak to my transactions easy, I can tell you I had a seller die of an accidental drug overdose in the middle of a transaction. I had a seller that was very dear to me that I've sold many properties for, worked with for many years, commit suicide last year. I have had, I've resold houses because shortly after moving in, one of the two people passed away on the living room floor of the house. So I've had extremely traumatic transactions that I've had to navigate, and people know that I will absolutely give you all my time when I'm available to do so. And I'm very present for my clients. That's the thing. So I'm not going to answer, and they see that. I think that's the other thing. When I'm with a client, they hear my phone ring 5 times and they hear me get 20 texts, and they see that I never stop to look at them and I constantly engage with them. So that lets them know that when they are texting me and I'm not responding to them, it's because I'm giving that same time to somebody else. Where it becomes a problem is you're with a client and you are giving another client immediate gratification on the phone. That client that I'm with knows that I should stop whatever I'm doing and respond to them because I've been rude enough to do it to them. So when people see my phone go off, and I don't even touch it, they know she respectfully gives the person that's in front of her time.
Well, it's such a weird balance because agents, I feel like we all have the tendency to go head over heels to give clients anything and everything that they need and to make them think that they are the only person in the world. And that's right and correct. But it puts the agent in a really bad position. They are entitled to a life. They are entitled to eat lunch, right, or, tuck their kids in bed or whatever that may be. And so I think if I had learned one thing at the very beginning of my career, another thing that we are not taught, that it seems like every other professional, industry is boundaries. That's the number one thing I would have learned.
Right. And, my vacations are very sacred to me. We love to travel. We love to travel with the kids. I spend a lot of prep work before I leave for vacation, getting certain coverage in place, making sure XYZ is taken care of, trying to head off everything I possibly can on the front end. And then I let every single one of my clients know I'm going to be on vacation from this day to this day. I'll respond. I might be real slow to respond. It might take me a day. If there's an emergency, call this person. They're so respectful of that. I've had very limited issues with people disrupting my time when I tell them on the front end what's going on in my life. And I think whenever we try to hide that from our clients, that's a problem. The other thing I'm real big on, and God forbid any of my clients ever watch this, they're going to all know my secret now, but I will say, if somebody says, can I schedule this day, that day? I will say, I'm already booked that day, or I'm sorry, I already have something scheduled at that time. I don't need to tell them what it is. I don't know why we think we have to say I'm with another client, I'm with this. I'm already booked at that time. I might have a pedicure scheduled. It doesn't matter what it is. I am booked at that time. And I've never had pushback from that. So and if I'm taking a whole day off because I want to swim in the pool and drink Trulies and not be bothered, and somebody says, can I see a house at 2 p.m. that day? I say, I'm sorry, I'm already booked for that whole day. Can you go the next day? And 99% of the time they say, sure.
And with the market the way it was the last couple of years, because I know people are going to go, well, that's impossible. Then figure out coverage. There's a million different, there's agents in your office that can help you. There's services you can pay $10 per door, to have help with. yeah, you shouldn't put your clients in a bad position because you're busy having a life, but you're allowed to have a life. And listen, if you're in trouble and you're struggling financially, I understand.
Right.
I'm not going to say like bending your boundaries, but maybe there's all times in our lives where we have to work a lot harder.
Yes.
And where other things may be sacrificed a little bit in order to keep ourselves out of trouble. And that is
right.
Also honoring yourself in a way.
Right.
But I think as soon as you're able to, I once had this is so totally true story. I was in my wedding dress and I had a client who knew I was getting married call like 75 times in a row. She's probably watching this. She said, I love her. But I was literally like crouched down underneath the skirt of my wedding dress answering a phone call because it was an emergency. Everything is always an emergency.
Yes.
Unless the house is on fire, someone's bleeding, it's exploded. We get paid a lot of money and there really aren't any emergencies.
Right. Right. And that's so true. And I don't know if you saw it. It was in one of those national groups that we're both in. And some guy had made a post that the night of his wedding, somebody had sent him an offer. And I think this might have even been the post where we met, because I really got mad on this post. It was the morning of his wedding, and an agent texted and said, I'm sending you an offer on this house. And he said, okay, well, I'm getting married today. I'll review it tomorrow. And the agent didn't respect that. And he set the deadline for midnight that night and then started blowing up this guy at his wedding reception, 7 p.m. Did you review the offer, et cetera? And I'm reading this post and I was horrified. I thought that is so inappropriate. And I was certain that every single comment on that post would reflect how inappropriate that was. And much to my horror, it was a whole bunch of agents scolding him that he should have had coverage in place. He should have known what to do. If you're going to take a day off, you need to have. And I thought, oh my God, this is where we're at. This is where we're at.
No, it's 100% where we're at. I think it's because that's what we're taught in a million different places. Definitely, if I had a magic wand, one thing to change one thing in the real estate industry, it would be to stop the teachers from teaching this shit. Yes. And the world is teaching it. I don't know. It's absolutely crazy. And like I said, look, if you're going to foreclose on your house, if you're in trouble, if you can't pay your electric bill or your water's going to get shut off, then yeah, you're going to answer the phone probably. But unless you're in a very serious situation, you got to hold those boundaries or you're going to lose your mind. And then bad stuff is going to happen. And the other thing that I think people do that is really, I've done it. I think we've all done it, is they make it seem like it's either this badge of honor. They're the best real estate in the entire world because they will take those calls, or their family, they say to their family, but I'm doing it for you.
Yes.
I'm answering the phone while I'm walking down the aisle for you, my soon-to-be bride, because otherwise we're not going to be able to live.
Right. And that's so obnoxious. Like, I don't know where our society all of a sudden became the busier you are, the more important you are. It's so bizarre. I don't know what we're racing for. We all end up in the same place eventually. So if you guys all want to race there, all right, I'll see you there eventually. But I don't understand where, like you said, it became such a badge of honor to be the busiest.
Mm. I think a lot of people are running from things, I can say for myself, I run from things. The other thing that's really pervasive in real estate culture is alcohol. We talked about this with a guest a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure every person on your social media thinks that you're going to a real estate conference to learn, when 90% of the people are there to get drunk off their faces, throw up in the trash can, and rally and drink some more. So I think a lot of people, especially highly driven people personally, are running from things.
Yes, 100%. And the very, very first hallmark of someone who eventually achieves clinical burnout is somebody who is overly obsessed with success.
Mm.
Those are the people that eventually reach burnout.
So what do you do to wrap this up? If you find yourself in trouble right now, whether it is trouble because you're afraid of your future. You are in trouble financially. That's the other thing that's really crazy that happened is we came off 2-3 years of insanity. And I think that everyone thought 2022, 2023 would be years where we could just coast. We would be able to still maintain our businesses, but maybe breathe a little bit. And instead it's like, nope, you got to triple down and work harder. Right. So it's very confusing. It is very scary. It's very easy to find yourself all wrapped up in the doom and gloom. So like, what do you do if you're in trouble with your mental health?
Yeah, well, first step is always recognizing it, right? Like you have to stop pretend it's not happening. You have to listen to when the people around you are saying you've changed, you're angry, you're this, you're that. No one wants to be around you. Kind of like what you did for your friend. People need to receive that information. The second thing is to realize when it's clinical versus when it's a fleeting thing. So another thing that we look at is 2 or more weeks. So if you have been in what you have decided to call a funk for a month, and you have not been doing your normal day-to-day activities for a month, you're not in a funk, you're in a clinical depression. You have to recognize and accept that. And then reach out for help, which is really hard right now because our offices are so overwhelmed with patients and people trying to get in, and it's very difficult, but you have to start somewhere. Your PCP, your insurance company, call them and ask for referrals. There's a lot of telehealth right now. Jump on with a telehealth doc. I mean, don't let it go just because you're having a problem with access to services. And I think, you have to recognize it and treat it sooner than later, because the longer it goes on, the harder it is to treat.
That's shocking to me that you said 2 weeks, because I tortured myself for like a year and a half before. And I had been in therapy for 4 years prior. Like I was talking to my therapist on a weekly basis and still not bringing up the fact that I wasn't feeling good for like a year and a half. So 2 weeks, that's crazy.
Well, and the problem is we don't know what to call it, right? Like how you just said, I don't feel good. That's what we think. Oh, I don't feel good. I'm in a funk. It's my hormones. I must be perimenopausal.
I'm tired.
It's COVID. It's the kids. It's my husband. It's, we will look for anything other than that dirty, dirty D word, depression. We'll blame it on anything in the world before we would ever admit that that's what's going on.
Yeah, it's true, because you're afraid and it's scary. Like it's just another, if you let that secret out of the closet thing, you're going to have to deal with thing that's going to go on your plate, people are going to find out about it. I mean, it is, it's like the dirt. I heard a quote a couple weeks ago that said, depression is the secret that we all share, which is so true,
I can't tell you how many times people walk into our office for the first time and they're horrified when they see me. Oh my God, don't tell anybody I'm here. Well, first of all, HIPAA, I can't tell anybody you're here. But second of all, half the town is here.
And
your friends and family are all here. And you obviously aren't telling each other about it.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that people start to talk about, I will say that we have a few leaders in the industry that are vocal about mental health. And I think that that's really beautiful. And I hope that everybody gets to a point eventually where they can share more of their struggles, in order to make other people feel safe. But
agree.
It's just, I feel like the world is so scary right now. I'm really afraid for people that don't get help.
Yeah, me too.
And not just people who go that ultimate step and try to hurt themselves, like just the people that are living in day-to-day misery because they don't feel good.
Well, and here's the thing, just because you don't wake up and impulsively kill yourself one day in that moment doesn't mean you're not killing yourself over time. You can die a very long, slow, painful death from depression as well.
Ooh, wow. That hits really hard. You are so driven, clearly, multiple businesses doing multiple things all the time. How do you keep your own baseline for happiness and your perspective such that it doesn't drive you crazy? How do you not push yourself into overachieving to death,
Yeah. So, I fall victim to the same things that everybody else does over and over. I think it's about bringing yourself back, right? Like we all deviate from that. We all have times, and there are definitely times where I let this emotional roller coaster get to me. I'm very adamant though about my boundaries. I'm very adamant about working out every single day. Working out is my antidepressant. If I don't work out, you can tell a very extreme change in my mood within a few days. I am very adamant about those reference points and about that hedonic adaptation. When I have an enormous closing, I don't ever let that become my new norm. I don't ever chase that high. I'm okay with waking up and just having a really normal day and being at peace with that, because at the end of the day, I don't want to be happy. I don't want to be rich. I want to be at peace no matter what is going on around me. And I try to really meditate on that a lot. Man, some days it works and some days I am a mess. But as long as I can keep bringing myself back to that concept, I think that's what keeps me going.
Well, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that you struggle with that too, and that
Oh,
no
of
one's
course.
perfect. But I feel like this week I'm going to make it. I'm going to think on like what that baseline of peace is for me, and I think I'm going to draw that on my vision board,
I love it.
or maybe even put it on my mirror somewhere. You know, where like every day I can look at it and be like, "Whoa, I'm so out of whack," and then be, you know,
Right.
like you keep saying, bring myself back to that
Right.
baseline.
Right. And it's not about losing control, because we all lose control. It's about bringing yourself back. That's the important part. You're not going to be perfect. You know, I'm not going to wake up Mother Teresa anytime soon, I promise. But I recognize at some point that I've slipped away and I'm capable of bringing myself back. And I think that's what's the most important.
Last thing, will you give us an example of like a baseline? Because I keep thinking in my head, it's like how I feel when I'm sitting on a beach with a Mai Tai. I actually don't even drink, but you know what I mean.
Right.
So
And
what if that isn't feasible for your baseline to be like on vacation all the time? Like, what is a healthy, feasible daily piece?
I think again, it's not allowing your emotions to be disrupted by the day to day. I think it's whether I'm having a really high day or a really low day, I feel pretty much the same. And my baseline doesn't look like your baseline doesn't, but it's how far do I deviate from what my normal mood is.
Hmm.
And everybody's normal mood looks really different, right? So being at peace just basically means not being disrupted by the things that are going on around you, whether they're really positive or really negative. I'm able to kind of maintain a straight line of emotion.
That's hard.
Very hard.
Ooh, that's hard, especially right now. Wow.
Very hard. And I'm telling you, man, I had this incident over the weekend where I was hot. I mean, I had a real incident with another agent over the weekend and I was so hot and I was just really ready to tee off. And I looked at my husband and I said, I choose peace. I choose peace. And I don't want to because I'm so mad and I hate it, but I choose peace. And I was just lit. I mean, I was lit and I had to keep saying to myself, choose peace, choose peace, choose peace, because I just wanted to lose my whole mind.
Yeah, it's yeah, I have been there many, many times. Choose peace over violence, right?
That's right.
I feel like
Don't look good in orange. I do not look good in orange. I keep telling myself that.
it is difficult, but I think this was so valuable, and I really hope that people listen, and I know that they will get some stuff out of this. You said that you teach classes sometimes. Is that just like in your local area? Do you do them virtually at
Yeah, so
all?
I do them virtually a lot. So I will try to be better about opening those up to a wider audience. That's something that I was kind of working on this year. My broker's
Because you
actually
need another thing,
I
right?
know, like one more thing. But my broker's actually helping me get licensed with the state to be able to provide CEUs in
Amazing.
Pennsylvania. So I think that's kind of a next step for me to really press the importance of this becoming more of a mandatory thing and not something that someone may or may not decide to do.
Well, we would love if you would share those opportunities in the future for people that want to jump in and learn more. And I hope that everyone who listens goes out and chooses peace this week as their equilibrium, because it is so damn hard. Peace be with you, right? Like,
That's right.
it's very difficult. But Katelyn, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank
Hang with
you.
me a few minutes, but that was lovely. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
everyone else, we'll see you next week.
Angela and Lindsay would love to receive your real estate referrals in Colorado. Connect with the Homegirls on social media at